An evil, wicked vortex of violence. 11th of February 1984, Cambridge versus Chelsea. Chelsea fans swagger into Cambridge's historic city by train, car and coach, looking forward to an easy day out on the beer in the provincial city around 55 miles north of London. They could have no idea that the quaint university city of Cambridge, one of the safest in the UK, will be a hotbed of young football casuals led by a man nicknamed the General, who had been planning a warm welcome for the notorious Chelsea headhunters and a chance to put their name on the map. The night prior to Chelsea's arrival, Leslie Muriani, the General, had gathered his most trusted lieutenants to strategically plan a vicious attack on Chelsea that would take them by surprise and earn them a huge scalp in the volatile world of football violence in the 1980s. The General had allegedly organised the football lads to meet in the City Arms near Cambridge's ground and had sent spotters out to let him know when Chelsea arrived and, if possible, to direct them to their location. According to court reports, there was up to 150 Cambridge casuals awaiting Chelsea that day, all young lads between 16 and mid-20s, excited at the prospect of testing themselves against the mighty Chelsea. They wouldn't be disappointed.
Some of the victims were left with visiting cards. One, recovered by the police, read, "You have been nominated and dealt with by the Chelsea headhunters." The prosecution claimed that the 9 men in the dock were led by 23-year-old London clerk Terry Last.
The Chelsea headhunters came to prominence in the 80s and 90s with extreme acts of violence, and in 1985, a judge sentenced 5, in his words, of the nastiest, most ruthless and vicious football hooligans to up to 10 years in prison for organising 6 years of violence in England and Europe. Sentences which were unheard of in those days and came about after police mounted Operation Own Goal to entrap alleged leaders of the Chelsea headhunters. Armed with razors and other weapons such as crossbows and machetes, they incited crowds into frenzies and led attacks on rival club supporters.
It was alleged he kept diaries stretching back to 1980 and detailing scores of incidents at towns right across the country. They included a particularly brutal fight at a Newcastle pub when Geordie fans were attacked from behind by Chelsea hooligans, some with knives. Several were badly injured. One Newcastle fan needed 140 stitches.
Teetotaler birdwatcher Terry Last, who worked as a law office clerk, was the alleged leader of the headhunters, according to the police operation and sentencing judge. The judge said at last that he strutted like a little tin pot leader whose vanity and arrogance knew no bounds, glorifying and reveling violence. Police said Last kept a diary of his exploits, which revealed he had a series of bank accounts containing thousands of pounds to fund the gang members travelling throughout Europe and as far as Chile to whip up fan violence. One policeman who watched him during football violence testified that Last became like a completely different person. He completely changed. His lips came over his teeth. He was completely distorted in anger. Terry Last and Stephen Hickey Hickmott, the alleged second in command, got weighed off with huge 10-year sentences. On this bloody day in Cambridge, Terry Last and Hickey were not to know of the daunting fate waiting for them in the future, and Chelsea fans were on their way to face their neighbouring minnows for 3 points and a day on the drink. It is disputed to whether the headhunters were in attendance on this day, but it was just scar for Chelsea fans, who paid the price for the growing Chelsea mob's reputation. But what was to explode that day was perhaps insight into what would follow for Hickey and Law in regard to jail sentences for football violence. I have read a publicly available court document on the events that took place that day, and I'll recount it in full to give a clear picture of the chaotic violence that ended with the alleged leader of the Cambridge lads that day, the General, being weighed off with a 5-year sentence, and then give my thoughts at the end. The day upon which the offence occurred was the occasion of a home match between Cambridge United Football Club and Chelsea. From the point of view of the police, there had been a history of trouble at the ground of Cambridge United, with the result that upon this occasion, as many as 600 officers had been drafted in order to take care of any trouble that might arise. The evidence was that Cambridge United supporters had met together on the night before the match for the purpose of planning and arranging attacks on Chelsea supporters when they came on the day of the match. It was the prosecution case, and there was considerable evidence to support it, that the attacks which in due course occurred were directed principally by the applicant, the General. He had previously attracted the nickname of the General. It was a nickname which the learned judge at the trial was to find was well deserved. The rendezvous of the Cambridge supporters was the City Arms public house, not far from the ground. On the morning of the day of the match, Cambridge supporters, mostly youths from 16 up to 25, started to gather at the public house, and there were groups of them in that area upon the evidence of between 30 and 150. From time to time, they would leave the public house and attack the Chelsea fans. They were assisted in this scouts posted for the purpose of tipping off the Cambridge supporters when Chelsea supporters were on their way. There was one occasion in particular when one of the lookouts directed a group of 8 Chelsea supporters to go to the City Arms itself in a quest of refreshments. As they came to the public house, they suddenly found themselves confronted by a group of 30 or 40 men, armed on this occasion, as on others, with glasses, bottles, pool cues and sticks. They set upon the unfortunate Chelsea fans. Those Chelsea supporters sustained bruises, grazes, scratches and cuts. The attack on this particular group of 8 men was, as the evidence showed, led by the applicant. He is a man of distinctive appearance, and he was readily identified by 2 of those who were set upon. As the time of the match neared, there continued to be excursions from the public house and the area of it. On one occasion, about 80 of them appeared to divide into 2 groups and then approach a number of Chelsea supporters from opposite directions, therefore making difficult their escape. Most of them were successful in doing so by the expedient of jumping over an iron railing dividing a dual carriageway road. 3 of them were caught, however. The first man was punched, kicked and hit with glasses and bottles. He suffered bruising, grazing and a cut which needed 8 stitches above his eye. The second man was similarly beaten with sticks, punched and kicked. He sustained a fractured jaw and had cuts on the top of his head, with bruises over the whole of his body. The plight of the third man was even worse. He was repeatedly punched and kicked on the ground, and eventually another man, not the applicant, hit him over the head with a milk bottle, which thereupon broke. The victim was jabbed with the remainder of the bottle in his neck, thereby severing an artery. It is plain that he would have died, but for the first aid administered to him by a police officer and an operation in the hospital lasting 2 hours. One of the police officers who went to help a Chelsea supporter was himself kicked in the back and had 2 discs in his neck cracking, keeping him off work for some time. There was the evidence of a police inspector that he had stopped a group led by the applicant and reminded the applicant face to face that he ought not to be there because he had been banned for life from attending the Cambridge United ground. To that, the applicant simply said, "It's a bloody public road, ain't it?" and went on his way, leading a group of some 30 youths in pursuit of Chelsea supporters. No doubt for the very reason that it was a public road and not the football ground itself, the inspector was unable at that stage to arrest the applicant. It was the superintendent who, with the aid of dog handlers, was able to arrest 25 of the Cambridge supporters, including no doubt some of those who had been most intent upon pursuit of the Chelsea fans. Okay, so I was asked to do that video, Cambridge and the General, whom orchestrated an attack on Chelsea in 1984. It was actually the Chelsea Scarfies. They weren't affiliated to any mob. They were just randomly attacked, and one of them got a bad slashing to the neck. Not great, but in fairness, Chelsea have been known to attack non-firm lads and stuff as well, as have many other clubs. So It is what it is. But the aftermath of that would see Chelsea allegedly getting payback when some of the lads who had been jailed for the attack on the Chelsea shirters arranged to attack them in prison. They'd been transferred into the same prison where some of Chelsea's top lads were. I think they were on remand at the time for something else, football related. According to the books, it says that they actually put a note through threatening the Cambridge lads. However, the note went through to someone else's cell, a big black guy, who was none best pleased with Chelsea for threatening him. But once they soon explained to him what the situation was and that one of their normal Chelsea fans had been slashed badly, etc., apparently he decided to help them. And then those lads, Cambridge lads, were terrorised in prison as payback. They didn't go into detail exactly what happened to them, but that's what it said in the book. So if anyone's got any further details on that, I'd be interested to hear it in the comments. I don't really remember much about Cambridge. The only things I remember about Cambridge, I think it was John Beck was the manager in the 90s, and he went on a good run. I think they just missed out on getting into the Premiership at one point. Dion Dublin, I remember, played for him before he signed for Man U. And that's it. I never really knew that they had a mob. Once I've done the research in the archives, they were pretty active in the 70s, late 70s and early 80s. And in that match, the old Bill had got around about 600 police on standby for potential trouble. So, although it's a quaint university town, clearly they did have some lads back in the day. The Chelsea headhunters, of course, need no introduction. They came to prominence after this. There was a court case, I think it was in 87. I think it was around 87. And for another football disorder thing where the police had gone undercover, but that got thrown out. And those police methods were then not used after that because of that case. That was under Maggie Thatcher's clampdown on football violence, etc. So that got thrown out. Then we had the Donald McIntyre documentary where he went undercover and infiltrated, I think it was Jason Mariner and Andy Frayne. I remember them being in a car talking about violent situations, etc. And the investigative journalist Donald McIntyre sort of stitched them up, as he has done on many occasions. That did catch up with him, and I'll do a video on that. And he got battered in a restaurant on the strength of what he'd done in that situation. So that's about it, really. But I've covered that. One of my subs asked me to, so I did the research. If you've got any that you would like me to cover in regards to true crime, sort of gangland stuff, or football stuff I cover as well, then put it in the comments, and I do list them all, and I do get to them eventually. Okay, take care.